Hi everyone, it's William. This is the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and I'm at the Schatzalp Hotel in Davos, Switzerland. Living here for a while, and it was the, as you probably already know, it was the sanatorium Schatzalp where Dmitri spent the end of his life. And where I am today is in one of in a room that would have been significant to him, because this was the office of the Chefarzt, the head doctor. He was, at Dimitri's time, a man named Gustav Maurer. And the first day he was at Schatzalp, Dmitri was very anxious. It was scary coming and meeting the doctor for the first time and not knowing if the doctor was going to tell you that maybe there was nothing he could do, that the TB was too far advanced. But that was not the case, even though Dmitri found out later that the doctor had secretly thought that it was hopeless. And then when he recovered to a greater extent than was expected, the doctor, I think, made the error of telling Dmitri, I didn't say it, but I thought you were terminal. And then, of course, after that, Dmitri was in a position where he never knew if what the doctor was telling him about his current condition was true or not. Anyway, it's cold today. And of course, in a hotel that's closed for the season, it will reopen in June. It's April now. You're not going to heat the entire building. So that's why I'm a little bundled up. I also am getting a bit of a cold. The filming is finished that I talked about earlier. It was basically 10-hour days for 6 days. And I hope you'll all get a chance to see the film, because Dmitri is a big part of it. But I don't have specific details to give you yet, because it's still very much a work in progress. And I'm not one of the filmmakers. So anyway, here I am chattering on. It's also Good Friday today, or Karfreitag, as they call it here. So for those of you who observe Good Friday, I wish you a Good Friday. There's no Orthodox church here in town, and since I'm a little under the weather, I don't think I'm going to go to the Good Friday service this evening at the Roman Catholic Church. Anyway, I'll stop blabbering. We're up to the 21st of April, 1921. It's Thursday. Gosh, it's 18th April as I'm doing this, so we're only 3 days off where Dmitri was on the calendar in April. Okay, a recap of the diary entry for the 20th. Well, it was basically just a quiet day with Maria and Gulia. And then with Coco, and Dmitri went to bed early. Today things are a little more lively, quite a bit more lively. Our cast today, well, we have Maria, Gulia, and Coco, of course. We also have various aristocratic friends of both Maria and Dmitri, Russian aristocratic friends going to a party. And we have, interestingly, we have the son of the famous Lev Tolstoy, the writer of War and Peace and Anna Karenina. His son will be at this party. All right, so here we go. Gulevich came by in the morning. He didn't have any new information. He just came to talk about the general situation. Around, around 11:30, Maria and Gulia came to take me to the Bois, just like yesterday. It was touching to walk together and play with Billy. The weather had become excellent. It was almost too hot. I lunched at 49 Rue de Courcelles. Afterwards, I went to the tailor's to have a few of my things altered and to order some new things. Around 4 o'clock, I went home and did some writing. At 6 o'clock, I went to see Coco at the Ritz. We had tea, and then I went home for just a minute to get changed. I dined with Coco at the Ritz Grill, and then we went together to the theater. We went to the Alhambra and saw some numbers that were quite good. Afterwards, Coco dropped me off at Maria's, or more accurately, at 49 Rue de Courcelles, because Mimi Polovtsova had arranged a party. Everyone was there. The Shuvalovs, the Bobrinskys, Seryoja Kutuzov, Maltsev, and Tolstoy, the son of the poet. A former officer in the Savage Division. He sings gypsy ballads beautifully with a raspy voice, and he has a huge repertoire of very old songs. A supper was provided around 1 o'clock. Overall, it was very nice, and I got home only around 3 o'clock a.m. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, Gulevich, if you recall, was one of the chosen members of Dmitri's Information Bureau. So he's coming to give his report, and he doesn't really have any new information, as Dmitri says, but he comes anyway. And as I said in a previous video, we are going to have some details, a look at how Dmitri is now approaching his political activities, and the people who formerly were gathered around him as the leader of their branch of the monarchist movement. But today, he goes off on this walk in the Bois. Apparently, Maria and Gulia either had a car or they had access to one of the Crucivaloni's car, because they're always picking him up. And they go off on this walk. And it's interesting that he uses this word, this adjective, touching. It was a touching walk. That's not, you wouldn't usually say that in English. It's an adverb that Dmitri uses a lot. Just like he always seems slightly surprised when people actually are nice to him, he also uses the word touching a lot in instances when you wouldn't expect it. But I guess it was just nice. You know, Gulia was apparently in a good mood, and it was just nice to go on this walk with the two of them. If you think that Maria and Gulia adopted a little boy named Billy, well, that was not the case. This was Maria's dog. I believe it was a bull terrier. Dmitri and Maria were both wild about dogs. And so, yeah, Billy was with them. So the usual thing with Coco, getting together with her, let's see, did he have tea with her? Yeah, he had both tea and dinner with her that day, and he went to the theater with her. I really tried to find the Alhambra, but I found two theaters in Paris, one that has that name now and one that had that name in the past, but not at the time, not in 1921, but both of them have a background, or at least one of them has a background of being sort of a music hall that had musicians, solo performers, and also musical reviews. So even though neither of them was called the Alhambra at that time, maybe somehow that was what local people called them. But anyway, when Dmitri refers to numbers in the plural, so it wasn't a play they were going to see, it was some kind of review. He enjoyed it, but not enough to tell us what it was called, as he usually does when he goes to the theater. So, yeah, then Coco drops him off at Maria's, and she doesn't come to the party. Was she not invited? Did she just not want to go? I don't know. Their relationship at this particular moment is a bit of a mystery still. But anyway, it always makes me laugh a little, because in the Russian emigre colony in Paris at the moment, when this was written, in aristocratic circles, it seems like when people have parties, they have their party at somebody else's place, and then when somebody else wants to have a party, they have it at the other person's place, and I'm not sure why that would be the case. So if you recall, Maria's birthday bash was at the Shuvalovs, not at her place, and now this party that has been arranged by Mimi Polovtsova, a friend of Dmitri's and Maria's, is being held at Maria's place, but it's not Maria's party. So anyway, I'm not going to, I didn't, come up with any facts about, even from my own files, about the Shuvalovs, the Babrinskys, Kutuzov, Maltsev. I've talked about them before, and so, I'll just let that be, instead of giving dates and patronymics and that sort of thing. But it is very interesting about Tolstoy's son. So his name was Mikhailovich. He was in his 40s. And it interests me that Dmitri calls his father, Lev Tolstoy, a poet instead of a pisatel, a writer. So maybe it's like in German, which if I understand correctly, if you call someone a dichter, then that means they're a literary writer, like Thomas Mann. If you just call them, what's the other word? Schriftsteller, I think. Then that's just sort of an ordinary writer. But a dichter is a writer of literature that belongs to the higher echelon of poetry, just like you could say that history belongs to philosophy. So my degree is not a doctor of history, but a doctor of philosophy. And yeah, so in that context, Lev Tolstoy was not just a writer, he was a poet, a dictator, a writer of great literature. And Dmitri, if you recall, if you watched the videos when he was 14, he really wanted to read War and Peace, but he wasn't allowed to because there were other books that he was assigned to read. That seems to primarily have been the reason that he was supposed to be reading, and so he wasn't allowed to choose his own reading material at that point. But I'm sure he did read it later, and he certainly read Anna Karenina because it was something that he would refer to later when he was older in exile, and he was talking about Russia and the deep sorrow that gripped him when he thought about Russia and what was happening in Russia at that time in the 1930s, and referring to Anna Karenina as being a book that really captures the Russian soul, so to speak. So, I think he probably would have found it very interesting to have Mikhail Tolstoy present, and for the other two reasons that he mentions as well, that he had been an officer in the Savage Division. The Savage Division, at one time, the commander of the Savage Division was the Tsar's brother, Mikhail Alexandrovich, and the Savage Division was made up of troops from Central Asia. So, in European Russia, it was sort of more dashing and exotic, and even the name, the Savage Division, made it a little bit, cool, extra cool. So he was part of that, and he also had this perfect voice, apparently, for singing gypsy ballads. And gypsy music was, and possibly is, tremendously popular in Russia. And if any of you have seen the Russian film from, I think, the 70s or early 80s about the Rasputin assassination, it features, Dmitri and Felix, if I recall correctly, going off to listen to gypsy music. And they probably did. Aristocratic people did go to these clubs where they could listen to gypsy music. And I think of people in Paris at that time like Django Reinhardt, gypsy jazz. Dmitri never mentions that specifically, so I think he was more interested in the Russian form of gypsy music. But anyway, Mikhail Tolstoy here has this, what I translated as raspy. I couldn't think of another, that's not literally what the Russian word means, but the Russian word is like a broken voice. So all I can think of is somebody like, Louis Armstrong was a kind of raspy voice. I wish there was a recording of Tolstoy singing his gypsy ballads. Anyway, Dmitri seems to have been impressed by him. So what do we have next time? Well, we have a little confab, or he summons all of these members of the little monarchist circle around him, and to talk to them about what's going on, and also to give them a scolding, and we'll find out about that. This is Dmitri being a little bit grand, as he was often criticized for by the adults in his life when he was a teenager, and they tried to counter that habit in him. So, he was actually quite a shy person, but he knew how to play certain roles. And so he'll be taking on this role of the Grand Duke, the Grand Duke, and meeting with these men, most of whom were older and more politically experienced than him. So it will be an interesting interval, and then he'll be going back to the theater. So yeah, a nice long diary entry for the 22nd, and an interesting one. I've been talking too long, so come back for that next time. I think I'll be making a video showing the rest of this room. You can only see a small part of it, and it's a really cool room, but that is something for later, and we'll see you next time. Bye.